What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another live stream. It's been a lot of fun doing these week to week, and today I'm very, very happy to be joined once again by two people who are joining me for the third time each on my channel. We have Norin joining me once again on this side over here. He's been here on the channel before. We talked about Hell Nights from the 80s together, and I had him on a random rambling episode. And then CineArts is Tommy is joining me for the first time here for a live stream. He joined me for a review of 2012. Starring John Cusack, as well as the Will Smith film 7 Pounds. But it's been quite some time since I've had both of these guys on the channel. And if you guys have been following along week to week, we've been reviewing MCU films that I have yet to cover here on the channel. And I thought it'd be a lot more fun to have people on. So before we get too far into this, you guys can find the links to these two guys down below. They have great channels littered with movie-related content. Go give them some love. Let them know I sent you. So yeah, how are you guys doing?
Very well, good. Yeah. Thank you for having me, Anthony.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's just such a pleasure, and I wanted to this year make sure I collab with more people. Last year, in the last 2 years, I kind of put myself in a box where I started these ginormous series that I was doing with like 4 or 5 YouTubers, and they just took so long to do. I just wrapped up 14 movies, The Land Before Time with Mike of Did You See That? I just wrapped up like all the Jaws movies. I'm about to wrap up all the Harry Potter movies, and I realized that was just like kind of pigeonholing my time with collabs into just only, collabing with a handful of people. But this way I've been able to have 2 guests on every week, and it's been a lot of fun. So yeah, last week I had some guests on and we talked on Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And today we're talking about Spider-Man Homecoming 2017. The first official MCU Spider-Man movie, which I think was something people wanted for a long time. So Tommy, first time here on a live stream. Curious for you, what was your thought process going into this? Of course, we had already seen Tom Holland appear in Civil War as Spider-Man. So where were you at? Did you want Andrew Garfield to be part of the MCU? Were you happy that we were getting a new fresh take on Spider-Man?
So it's weird for me. I mean, I watched it on 4K. Once again, going through it this week.
Nice.
Yeah, I didn't actually see the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films.
Really?
Purely because it was. I love the Sam Raimi ones so much that I thought obviously they're just redoing the exact same, in a way, origin story. So I never actually felt the need to see the Amazing Spider-Man films. So I can't actually comment on Andrew Garfield other than obviously spoilers for No Way Home. I can say that obviously I did love him in that film. So yeah, I was I thought it'd probably be the best way to do it if they just sort of put him into the MCU. And this isn't obviously an origin story. So I guess it does make sense more than them redoing that. And Tom Holland in the role, I do love him in the MCU, especially as we go into Infinity War, Far From Home, those films. But yeah, no, he's great in the role as Spider-Man. So yeah.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. I definitely. That's interesting to hear that you've actually not seen, like, it's always interesting to see how people's trajectory of like cinema goes and like what people see before or last compared to something else or not at all. And it's interesting because that should make this a really interesting conversation, because Norin, I know you are a huge Andrew Garfield stan in the Spider-Man world. I, similar to Tommy, am a big fan of the Sam Raimi films, and I struggled with the Amazing Spider-Man movies initially. I won't lie, just because I felt like they didn't capture that same magic. But they've kind of, as they've sat with me longer, I've grown to love them more. And Andrew Garfield's performance as well has only grown to kind of be something I enjoy, especially with him appearing, like Tommy said, in No Way Home. So what about you, Norin? How are you feeling when this was coming out as a fan of the Andrew Garfield films?
So when I remember 2017 coming around and then the first trailers dropping for this and me feeling very not excited. Like I wasn't hating on it. I just didn't have it wasn't pulling me in. Like I wasn't like, oh, I need to go to the theaters to see this, because we already had, like you said, the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi universe, which was so good in its own way for beginning a lot of comic book movies and everything. And then for me being such an Andrew Garfield lover, because when I watched those ones, I felt like he just embodied the kind of Peter Parker I wanted to see on screen. And in terms of the character growth that he went through in the 2 movies, I thought was fantastic. I loved it. So the character journey I really enjoyed. So knowing that we're getting Tom Holland, I did enjoy him in Civil War. I'm not going to lie. I really like Civil War. That's one of my favorite MCU movies. So I didn't hate on that one, but that was the first time I've ever seen him. I'd never seen him act in anything else. And then when Spider-Man Homecoming was coming, and then the trailers, I was just like, I don't know, man. And this was one that I think I actually waited to watch this until it came to like streaming or like, you know, to buy on like Blu-ray. That was the first time I ever watched this film.
Interesting. Gotcha. So yeah, that's such interesting perspectives from the two of you guys, and kind of how like your personal fandoms of Spider-Man kind of either pulled you to this or didn't pull this to you this or the other films, you know. So yeah, for
Yeah.
me, I was pretty excited just because I wanted to see Spider-Man finally in the MCU. Like you, Norin, I was a little disappointed that we weren't just going to continue those movies because they were coming out at the same time as we were getting, you know, the MCU stuff. But it also kind of begged the question of like, where were the Avengers in that Spider-Man universe that we were watching with Andrew Garfield? You know, it didn't really fully make sense timeline wise, so to speak. But yeah, when the movie came out, I had a blast with it for sure. I was like, this is a cool, fresh take. I like that we skipped the origin story. They're like, everybody knows how he becomes Spider-Man. There's no reason to redo that. And I really like that Tom Holland brought that kid energy that you get in a lot of the cartoons and the things that most of us kind of like fell in love with Spider-Man in, you know, whether it be like animated stuff or video games, or like, I know for me, I grew up watching, my mom used to put in front of me all the time the OG like 60s Spider-Man show with like the classic theme song. And you know, I always loved the characters like kind of high school days. And I feel like they kind of always skipped over that. Like at the movies, he was always kind of just about to graduate high school or just did, and like kind of getting into the adult life. And I like that we get to see like a kid Spider-Man who's kind of fumbling his way through it a little bit. And yeah, I think Tom Holland captured that essence really well. One thing I think that both Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man are like that I struggle with is that they're just too like good looking and cool. Not to say that that Tobey Maguire isn't, but like he plays that nerd character way better, like where he's awkward and stuff. Here, I just find it hard to believe that people would bully Tom Holland's character the way that they do with the whole Penis Parker thing as much as they do, because he's kind of like a good-looking guy. He's kind of got like this awkward, charming energy to him. And the same with Andrew Garfield. He's kind of a cool character. But yeah, it was a lot of fun going back and revisit this film. I realized there were some things I had bigger gripes with now, especially seeing the trajectory of this character moving forward. But Tommy, we'll throw it back to you. What were your thoughts going back and revisiting this movie after this long in the MCU?
So I've seen it 4 times, and this one was just sort of going through. I actually watched more than I intended because, you know, I was meant to just watch a few scenes again here and there because I saw it last year, but then I ended up watching quite a lot of it. But yeah, and I've always enjoyed this one. I don't think it really elevates, you know, cinematically, emotionally. The stakes are just not. You know, it's meant to be a light-hearted film, which I get, but it's just not really. Like the villain, Vulture, obviously, and everything around him, it only really gets to an actual threat level, you know, in the sort of final act of the film. And just, you know, it's a good film. It's full of energy, kind of thing. And Tom Holland is great. I love him and Ned as well. You know, Peter Parker and Ned, and the scenes with them. But really, it just doesn't elevate emotionally and stuff for me to fully get, you know, moved by the film. But it's always one that I enjoy, you know, going back to for comfort. You know, it's a warm film. Some of the comedy doesn't work, but mainly it does. So yeah, it's not one of my favorite Spider-Man films, but I do enjoy it. I think it's a good film. I'd probably rate it, you know, mid sevens kind of thing.
Nice.
So definitely one I really enjoy. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I just actually rewatched it. I meant to rewatch it yesterday, but then I had to like work a little earlier than intended, and so I watched it actually just before I finished 30 minutes before we got here on the stream, just to get a super refresher. And yeah, you know, I kind of agree with what you're saying. Like there is a sense of stakes that's not there but it is more of a lighthearted fare, and it's more about just kind of like the fun. I think that's also helped by Michael Giacchino's score, that like very catchy theme that we hear for Spider-Man throughout the course of these movies. But Nora, what about you, man? What did you feel? How did you feel about this movie today?
Oh yeah, so it was kind of fun rewatching this one. I did this one while I was at work, so I work graveyards. But I work at a gas station, so when it kind of slows down, I get a lot of time to maybe, you know, pop on a show or pop on a movie and like clean and do stuff and kind of watch it, you know. So this was, I think, the third time I've seen this movie. Yeah, I think this was the third time I've seen it. And what Tommy said, a perfect example is emotionally. When I watch the other Spider-Man films, I get emotionally invested in those characters. This is still a good film. It's still got great CGI. We still have great action sequences. Like Michael Keaton is probably the highlight. I think the best actor in the film, clearly. And you can see this is kind of his coming back party, because we all knew he was going to have another, you know, coming, like he was going to be in a lot of stuff after this. So it was kind of cool to see him again. But I think, yeah, like I said, there's no real emotional investment and weight to it. It's just kind of a really good popcorn flick. That's how I would describe it. It's fun. It's something to kill the time and you enjoy it and everything, but it's not one that makes me want to pop on the next one. Like, I'm like, I want to go to the second one. Like, let's do it right now. Let's go to the third one. Let's do it right now. You know, I kind of want that emotion, kind of similar to what I get when I watch a Star Wars film. Like when I watch one of those movies, it instantly makes me want to kind of watch the next movie and just pull me right in.
Yeah, well, that much I could definitely agree with. Love me with some Star Wars, and I know the latest videos that Tommy's been doing. Actually, he's been going through the Star Wars prequels. I know you just dropped your video recently for Revenge of the Sith, so it's actually a perfect example too. Yeah,
Sweet.
Yeah, you know, I had a lot of fun going back to it, and one thing that's interesting is the Michael Keaton element, because he plays Vulture. They only really kind of reference it near the end when Spider-Man leaves that note that says he caught like the Vulture guy, but they never really give him that name. But I thought he was great casting for the role. He's one of those characters that we just had never gotten to see in a live action movie, and I thought they cast a perfect character. And I like that they kind of made him somebody who he's a bad guy, but he's doing it for family. You know, like family's important to him. And I think that ultimately one of my favorite things about this movie is that reveal that the love interest that Peter's going after the whole movie, Liz, that her dad is Michael Keaton's character, and we find that out when they're going to go to the dance, which I thought was great. I love that reveal and that sequence when they're in the car, the tension. I think that's a really strong sequence. And I love the fact that he's like, "Listen, you saved my daughter earlier in the film, so yeah, just stay away from my business, and everything will be all right." I kind of like that they added that layer to his character. But on the flip side, something I found myself struggling with this time around is that love interest, Liz. I don't really think that she's an interesting character at all. And I think that because there's this plan to set up Michelle, aka MJ, later on Zendaya's character, she's just kind of off on the side too. So they don't really give her enough screen time. And I feel like Zendaya has become such a great actress since this movie, in some of like things like Dune or just like anything else that she's been. I just saw that movie Challengers too. I thought she was great in that. And I kind of feel like she was forcing it a little bit here. I don't know how you guys feel. It feels like that, like kind of like sloth, kind of like lazy, like, oh, I don't care kind of energy that Zendaya is doing in the movie. It was a little bit forced at times. So it was something I was slightly struggling with. But I'm curious what you guys think. Robert, I'll throw it to you this time first. What do you think about the love interest Liz in this film that ultimately doesn't lead anywhere in any of the other films?
Yeah, that's what I think. To be honest, I think both the female characters in here were probably underutilized, to be honest, in terms of just the characters in which you could have did. And I think that this first one is mainly just another thing is what we didn't talk about kind of is Robert Downey Jr. So I think this one focuses mainly on that whole thing of Tom Holland, you know, Peter Parker feeling like he's part of the Avengers, him wanting to prove himself to Iron Man and everything. And the love interest stuff is just all on the back burner, like everything with that, you know what I mean? Because even Zendaya, like I said, I didn't really even like her in this first movie. I think, like you said, as she's gone on, she's just gotten better and better. Like she's one of those actresses that is just, as the years go on, she's just going to get better and better. So that's why I think both those characters, I think, were just kind of underutilized in terms of love interests, and probably what both of the actresses could have did. Because even the girl that played Liz, like I'm pretty sure she could have did a lot more and probably pulled more emotions out of that character if they would have gave her some more free range.
Yeah, I agree. They almost kind of made her like the typical teenage girl of like, yeah, I like Spider-Man. Like it's just like she doesn't have like like layers. But I'm curious, Tommy, what do you feel? How do you feel about like both Zendaya and the love interest?
Very similar. But yeah, I mean, even the scene at the end when I'm not criticizing the actress, but it doesn't really seem like it's very convincing what's going on. Like she's not that upset that obviously Adrian is going to be locked up on trial, and it's just the whole thing. It just feels like an afterthought, really. Yeah. Zendaya is doing some weird stuff here. The character is a bit more, yeah, sort of a moody teenager, but she's definitely more interesting than Liz. I found them, them scenes very, very boring, personally. Just any scenes when they're together, there's nothing to it really, other than of course when we go to the house and we meet, we find out that big reveal that obviously the dad is Vulture. Other than that, yeah, I would agree. It's both because they're kind of trying to balance it out. It doesn't work either way, really. Especially with Liz, just very uninvesting for me.
Yeah,
But yeah,
one of the interesting things going back and revisiting these movies now is seeing some of those little details that they tried to tee up for something that, like, I would say for the most part, leading up to Infinity War and Endgame, they gave us tons of satisfaction for like, payoff for a lot of things. But there were these little things here and there that were like teed up that took a long time to get to. Last week we were talking about Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and how it took like literally until last year to finally get Adam Warlock, who was teased in that film. And in this film, you have this whole thing with Liz and her kind of moving away, but her character ultimately just becomes completely irrelevant. Like they've done nothing with her. So it's like when you watch this now, that relationship and his care for that relationship almost feels pointless. Obviously, it's setting up Zendaya's character is kind of like lurking on the side, but she's also just not given enough of like a third wheel kind of energy to really make her feel like she's even teed up that much. It really isn't until Far From Home that they really do something with her.
yeah,
And then one of the post-credit scenes for this movie shows, of course, Vulture in prison with who is supposed to be Scorpion, and that character is also not shown up in anything else later on. And I guess I should just quickly mention the premise here for anybody who needs a refresher. Movie opens up and we see it at the events of the first Avengers film, and Michael Keaton and his gang are like part of a salvaging team. They end up getting taken over by the government. This ends up putting them kind of like on the side where they're stealing some of these parts and they're creating like weaponry that they're selling in like kind of the black market, so to speak. Of course, Spider-Man ends up catching wind of this. You have Tony Stark kind of trying to help him become this superhero. He's kind of playing like this father figure in the movie. Ultimately, Spider-Man doesn't fully listen to Iron Man as far as staying out of it, gets himself caught into a whole lot of stuff. And in the midst of this, there's, of course, the romance we're talking about and a decathlon and a bunch of random things that start to happen throughout the course of this movie. But the basic gist is like Spider-Man's trying to stop this arms dealer known as Vulture, who turns out to be the father of his love interest. Now, one thing, like you mentioned, we mentioned the Robert Downey Jr. So, Tommy, I'll throw it to you this time first. How do you feel about Robert Downey Jr.'s utilization in this film? Do you think that we needed Iron Man in this film, or do you think they used him just fine?
whether or not we needed him, I think it's definitely one of the highlights. Him and Happy, because that was the comedy wise, that was some of the funniest parts in the film, especially the ending when Happy sort of says, "Oh, I'll be close behind," and then
Yeah,
Tony says, "How about loose follow?" And
right.
just
Yeah,
hilarious moment there. Yeah, I think it does because he does show up as well, whether he's there or not, in person, in different action scenes. So I think it does. Maybe it detracts from it being, more of a Spider-Man film, but in terms of just enjoyment, I definitely think it's one of the highlights, really. Seeing Tony and Peter and obviously Happy as well together, especially, yeah.
yeah, no, I definitely agree. I love the utilization of here. It's crazy to me more than anything that I think if I could be wrong, absolutely on the numbers, but I think that Tony Stark's in like less than 10 minutes of this movie or about 10 minutes of this movie. And I think he got paid
Well,
like
yeah.
$10 million or something for that, which is just crazy how much money he made for like how little. I think he got paid more than Tom Holland or like around that what Tom Holland made for the whole movie, which is insane. I could be wrong about those numbers, but I know that he got paid millions for his like 10 minutes of screen time. So what about you, Robert? How do you feel about the inclusion of Tony Stark in this movie?
I have somewhat soft feelings about how it kind of detracts from the whole Spider-Man movie thing, and the fact that I really dislike the fact that we add Tony Stark's tech to Spider-Man's suit. I really dislike that so much, like because I was such a fan of like Tobey Maguire's and Andrew Garfield's, and they're those like old school young, like just boys in the garage, or in their basement making all their tech themselves, breaking things and testing out this and making the web thing and stuff like that for Andrew Garfield. And then Toby, sewing his own suit and designing his own suit and everything. He didn't have to worry about the web thing, of course, that's different. But I think for Tom Holland, I think the Tony Stark thing takes away from it a little bit. I love seeing Robert Downey Jr., don't get me wrong, and especially that we don't have Tony Stark anymore. Like, it's just so fabulous to see him again because you love that character and you miss him a lot. But it's just, yeah, I think it takes away a little bit from it being solely a Spider-Man movie. And like I said, a little bit even though he's only in it for 10 minutes, a little bit less time with him, and we could have had another scene with Zendaya. We could have had another scene with Liz or something like that. And that would have just kind of solidified that relationship thing more of this is his growth of realizing, you know, oh, this isn't the right path. Maybe she's not the right woman for me, or this, that, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree for sure. I think that there's a couple of things they could have worked around to maybe have added a little bit more. Um, it's tough. The decathlon part of the movie obviously is, I feel, only really there because the characters need to travel, because that's where like the base of the villains are.
Yeah,
And
it's like
I feel
what
like
is it? Writer's convenience. Writer's
right,
convenience.
right. And of course it ends up playing into later on where like, Liz ends up telling her dad in the car, like, oh yeah, like, he vanished like he always does when we were over there. And then of course Spider-Man appears. So it kind of helps set things up. It's not like completely a useless portion of the film, but it does kind of feel like a bit of like a just the thing to do on the side. But one thing that I really want to address that you mentioned there is the one of the big criticisms I've heard from so many people about this movie is the Spider-Man Iron Man version suit, having the voice in the head, the AI, like all these different things he can do. Um, that's something that I'm a little torn on, because I love that they did it because it gives it its own identity. But I do agree that like that just more old school Spider-Man doing this himself kind of thing is awesome, which is what makes that scene awesome later on when you go to No Way Home, where they're all talking about Tobey Maguire's like having the web shooter in him, and like
Yeah.
they're all like doing the science together. It feels like that kind of Spider-Man thing that you want to see. Tommy, I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Now that Norin brought it up, what do you think about how they handled like the new Spider-Man suit?
And yeah, I'm never as big on the modern ones as much. I agree. But as you say, it is unique. It does stand out. I like the eyes especially. But the whole thing, yeah, I guess it just kind of I accepted it because at that point, being in the MCU, there was things happening more technology based. I suppose, yeah, that epic scene in Sam Raimi's one where he's designing the suit and all this. It would have been cool if we had that. But yeah, I do like the gadgets as well throughout the film. I guess it is just unique. That's what it is. It is unique. It's different. I do prefer the more classic ones, Sam Raimi. But it's a good design. I like as well the ending when we tease the next suit as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was cool. Yeah.
yeah, it's a cool moment, obviously. But yeah, it's not my favorite, but it does stand out, and it's quite cool how it's used throughout the film, portrayed. So yeah.
Yeah, there's some great moments of humor with it. I like the scene where he's testing it out and he's trapped inside like that little like damage control place or whatever, like where they have all those different things. And
Yeah,
he's just
like the factory facility thing.
right. Yeah. Like I love just seeing him play around with it. And there's like, some fun moments where he's trying to chase down like those guys. And something else we haven't even mentioned that I always forget about this movie is that two of the main goons that are in this film we have two versions of Shocker in this movie, who is a
Yep.
low tier Spider-Man villain, who I always find more often than not tends to be one of the earliest villains that you'll fight in a Spider-Man video game. Like they almost always keep Shocker near the beginning of some sort of video game. At least one of the first few villains you'll always fight. And he's so popular, but we've never had him as like a main villain in a Spider-Man movie. Like I feel like as a kid, I always knew, oh yeah, Shocker, Rhino, all these characters, but Shocker always got like the short end of the stick, so to speak. Um, so I won't lie, that's something I don't like about this film either. Is like the making two different guys that like are Shocker, one takes over the mantle. It feels like they
Yeah.
just kind of don't really give Shocker much of a character. Um, even though again, he's not like a top tier, like super powerful one, but yeah, I'll throw it to Tommy this time first. So how do you feel about how they handled the Shocker as like kind of this like side villain?
Well, at first time I saw it, I just didn't really know what was going on with that.
Yeah.
It was very much sort of just thrown in there. And to be quite honest as well, a lot of the scenes with Vulture and his men, that's probably the weakest part of the film for me. It's just personally unengaging. I thought from the get go, the opening scene even, it's just very. I just couldn't really get that invested in it. So the first time around, especially seeing it, I didn't really pick up too much until the ending. I was talking to my brother and stuff, going on about that. But yeah, I mean, I also played a lot of the video games. So when I was really young, the 2000 Spider-Man PS1. played
Classic.
that. And I believe Shocker is in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carnage and all those characters. So it would have been cool, yeah, to see more. And in this film, as I say, that's one of the main flaws. Is just how sort of basic a lot of the dialogue is there. So I didn't really think the portrayal in this film either was that great. But yeah, obviously, more of a foil for Vulture, really. The characters there. So yeah, not much to say on that. I have not really read any of the comics personally. I've not never been big on the comics, so at least just keeping up with them. So yeah, I sort of grew up on the video games. But yeah, it would have been cool to see more more dedicated screen time. But yeah.
Yeah. I really do wish they had done like made him more of like the character. If you're gonna do Shocker, like he's wearing the
Yeah,
jacket, the first guy that gets killed, he's wearing a jacket that resembles like with the yellow sleeves. But it's
yeah,
like they
it's
don't
just the
really do
color.
enough. Right, right. Well, what about you, Robert? How do you feel about how they, the two different Shockers in this movie?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of a little weak sauce, and especially because me being a fan of the Spider-Man TV show and like even the games, like Shocker, like you said, was always one that I just thought his design was cool. The suit is very simple, you know what I mean? But it was like yeah, like I said, he was always a street level bad guy, you know what I mean? One of those basic dudes that was always, with Scorpion or something like that, and they fought. And but yeah, there was like no commitment to the character. It was basically just there so they can show off what they were doing with the tech because they were stealing the Shatari tech and they were making all kinds of gadgets out of it and everything and stuff. So, like I said, they could have committed more to that and probably just played it very safe. A lot of the stuff in this movie, I think they just played it very safe because they didn't want to take too many risks because they just wanted us to kind of get involved with Tom Holland and this new universe and kind of, accept him into the MCU, so they didn't want to do anything really drastic.
Right, right. Well, speaking of something that they did though, that was pretty drastic though, it's a good little segue here, is something that I think most people have grown to really enjoy, but maybe shocked some people initially, which was the plan to make Aunt May freaking hot and cast Melissa Tomei. So I'll throw it right back to you, Norin. How do you feel about Melissa Tomei as Aunt May versus what we traditionally think Aunt May to be, an older woman?
I know that was kind of weird. That was kind of, I don't know. It's just so I still feel a little bit unsettling about it because I find her like she's cute. Like obviously she's a gorgeous woman. She's very gorgeous. So it's just like just picturing anime in my head all the time. It's just gray hair, older woman, that nice lady that gives you like the hard caramel candies, buys you a comic or something like that. That's what I picture in my head. So like when I see her, she's just like a fantasy version, and it's so weird, but it does pay off though. Her character is such a great actress, and the connection that she has with Tom Holland, I think, is probably one of the strongest things with throughout the three movies. So once we get to that third movie, you know what I mean? So the payoff moments you get with her character really do hit home because I think she has a great chemistry with Tom Holland. So overall, like I wasn't mad at it. Like I said, she's gorgeous. She's a great actress and good chemistry.
Yeah, I felt similar. At first, it was weird because it's like, yeah, you think of Aunt May as this older woman, but they cast Melissa Tomei, who of course has been in plenty of films back in the day, has a very solid filmography. But yeah, it was a very big departure from the character we know. Tommy, how did you feel about like hearing Melissa Tomei was going to be Aunt May?
Yeah, I mean, it is very different. I do prefer the Sam Raimi portrayal. There's a couple of cringy scenes as well in this involving Aunt May. I think the one with the montage and the song playing when he's getting ready for the gathering. She's putting you're doing the tie and all this, and
Right.
then she starts dancing. Watching it again, it's just every time I think, oh, okay, we'll see this scene, and it just reminds me of how cringy that moment is. Personally, for me, just what is going on there. And I think in this one again, it's just not a very surface level. A lot of the things in this film, I don't think that there's major flaws with this film too much. But I just think it's very surface level, very sort of one note at times, and it just doesn't. I think there's not really too much cringy moments though going forward in the franchise, but this one, as I say, that moment especially with the dancing, there is good chemistry though. I do like the chemistry between the two of them. And she's obviously, yeah, very attractive. seen her in The Wrestler as well. She was great in that. She's a great actress. So I think it's good casting, but just the way she was used in this film wasn't quite for my liking, really.
Hey, fair enough, man. Fair enough. No, I love that, and I love that we all know she's absolutely gorgeous. I actually got to see her at MegaCon here in Central Florida um earlier in the year, and she was like, I didn't go to like meet her because I didn't have the money to meet her, but I just saw her at the booth. She's
Nice.
I can confirm she's gorgeous in person too. Um, Now, one thing that I've been wanting to do on these that are a lot of fun is, I think for the most part, despite any grievances we may have or things that we find are maybe like some gripes that we have, it seems like we all enjoy the film, find it to be a good time. Like by no means a bad Spider-Man film. But in recent years, and I think thankfully No Way Home continued to like hit that out of the park. Most people are loving Spider-Man right now. The Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man has not been an issue right now with Marvel movies. But there's been a lot of issues across the board, a lot of divisiveness across all the MCU shows and movies that we've been getting post Endgame. So I'm curious. I'll throw it to you, Tommy, this time first.
Mm.
What do you feel has changed in the MCU from this era that was leading up to Endgame and Infinity War and Endgame versus kind of what we're seeing right now? And what do you think has kind of gone wrong, or what do you think has gone right? Where's your head on that?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen every single thing. I've not seen the shows really. I've seen One Division. I didn't like that really. I didn't think it was bad. I just didn't. It was a bit of a slog for me. Generally, I think the sincerity is just not there. There's just it just seems like they care about the money making, and sincerity as well. With I really love when there's messages and stuff in films, but it just seems like they're trying to appeal, to social media. I guess I don't use social media, but it just seems like very checklist approach with a lot of the things that's going on. And then characters are saying things, and it's not really very authentic, and it takes me out of the experience. And generally, there's just too much going on as well. That's one of the main things. There's too much shows. I'm never going to watch a lot of the shows. Just I never will. I don't have the time. And just as well, when they brought out so many films, straight after Endgame, and I think potentially they could have. It was never going to happen, but they could have waited a little bit. I think even to bring out any
It's true.
films, really, just to keep the effect of Endgame, and we've got a few more Avengers films coming out in a few years. I can't quite believe that, really. As just a viewer of the first three phases, we're already getting some more considering what happened in Endgame. I'm not really too hyped about those films. I think over the course of a year, I lost hype, really, just because it's not the same personally for me. It's not the same magic, the feeling, and it's just as a viewer, it's just like they don't really care about me as much. I feel like I did when I first saw the Avengers. That was the first one I saw. Before that, I was putting it off because I thought you have to be well versed in the comics and all this kind of stuff. But then when I watched it, I realized obviously you don't. You can just sort of watch the films, and now I feel again like I'm left out. I'm kind of I'm never going to get a lot of the stuff that's going on in the films because I'm not watching the shows as well. Don't look very appealing, a lot of them. So I just have to accept that now. But yeah, not big at all on the current phases. Although I did love No Way Home, Shang Chi, even Eternals. A lot of
Amen.
people don't like that, but Eternals for me was actually a very good film. But most of the other ones, Thor: Love and Thunder, Doctor Strange 2, Ant-Man 3, I didn't even like. Really dislike that one. So yeah, just it's a shame, and even the CGI is at its worst now. Just because it just feels like there's a lack of no disrespect, but a lack of effort. The passion is just not to the level that it was for me. Overall.
Fair enough, man. I think that's been a pretty common criticism, right? Like we've seen a lot, and I think at the end of the day, when you look at the previous phases, especially like the first two, like they were pretty small. They were pretty contained. They would
Yeah.
have characters appear and be introduced in other people's movies, and they would kind of flow into the next Avengers movie kind of naturally. And then maybe as we got closer to Infinity War and Endgame, there was a lot more kind of going on, but it was all still kind of contained right after Endgame. One thing that I struggled with was just like, and at this point, I was really because of how good the lead up to Infinity War and Endgame was. I was on board for a long time, but it's been a few years already. At this point, I think I saw that we just hit 5 years last weekend. from Endgame, which
Yeah.
is crazy. And you know, there's been a lot of movies and shows, and some of these phases have been not only double but triple or quadruple the lengths of previous phases if you count in the time of the shows. And I liked WandaVision. You know, totally can respect why somebody wouldn't, but I liked WandaVision. I was like, okay, I'm on board. This is kind of
Mhm.
cool and weird, and I like how it's kind of tying into things. I think Loki is one of the best things the MCU has ever released. I loved Moon Knight, but then there's been things like She-Hulk or Miss Marvel that, as they've sat with me, have kind of, you know, maybe not been as good, or ones that people just don't talk about as much, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that I enjoyed. But and it's really setting up the next Captain America. But it just feels like there's so much going on. And you have things like Eternals that had left the movie with like a big celestial creature ripping out of the earth, but they've really made little to no reference to that in any other movie. You know, you have Shang-Chi having been introduced years ago. We haven't seen him appear again anywhere else. So it does feel like there's kind of like a lack of vision for what's going on. So what about you, Robert? How do you feel about kind of like where we were here versus where we are now? And what do you think's gone wrong?
I kind of feel like now we're kind of at that point where we're in an era where it's quality over quantity, and it's kind of they kind of wrote themselves into that boat because Disney has Disney Plus now, and they have to put out content for us to want to watch and be there and stuff like that. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit with this whole thing because what they did is now they had to produce all this content. We have to keep putting this stuff out, even though we're not as, like you said, committed. We're not as, you know, we don't care about it as much. We just got to get the stuff out here. We just got to make money and stuff and have something in the slot or something coming out every Wednesday for this and stuff. So I think it's just that's the era that we're kind of in now is quality over quantity. I do enjoy some of the shows. Like I'm glad you brought up Falcon and Winter Soldier. I had a lot of fun with that. I had espionage, like Jason Bourne vibes. It was really good. The acting is probably some of the best compared to some of the other shows. So it's like I didn't hate that one at all. I had fun with Loki season 1. Season 2, I was a little bit mixed on. She-Hulk, I didn't like. Moon Knight, I didn't watch that one. And WandaVision, I was okay with. But all those shows I only watched once. None of them I was like, oh, I want to go back. I want to binge this. So it's
Right.
like, yeah, we just kind of hit that point now where they're just pumping out, which is, you know, that's, you know, something they decided to do. That's what they want to do. But I think what Tommy said a great idea would have been after Endgame, I wouldn't have minded a break because
Right.
like for me and Anthony and you, Tommy, we are Star Wars fans and we went through a long time where we had to wait years and years
Yeah.
and years for another Star Wars content of some kind. So we're used to waiting and it makes you develop nostalgia. It actually kind of makes the other stuff that came out previously more loved and stuff like that. And now it's kind of like, yep, we're just throwing stuff out there, just throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, it's true. And I feel like we're in this phase now where there's a bunch of stuff that like people are just like diving off of. People who would have been big fans of or were big fans and kept up, you know, like you know, you
Yeah.
have Tommy here saying like he's, you know, just chosen to opt out of the shows. I know a lot of people who have that outlook on it. And you know, a lot of franchises are doing it, like, you know, with a lot of projects going on. Star Wars has shows that are going on and stuff like that. I thankfully though, it's not like as bombarded, whereas Marvel will have like 3 or 4 films in a year sometimes and two,
Yeah.
3 shows. And it's like, dude, that's just like there's so much that it's kind of hard, you know, at least now with Star Wars, it's been a good few years since our last movie. We got another one coming
Yeah.
out. We got shows, but they're usually somewhat spaced out where it's not like they're overlapping with one another. Whereas there's been a bunch of cases where Marvel movies are coming out when a show is airing at the same time, and then they're giving shows to characters that I don't think have fully earned it yet. You know, I like the Hawkeye show. I liked how they kind of teed up Kate Bishop in that show and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Of course, appears at the end of the Marvels. Um, but you know, a character that was introduced there in the MCU is a character of Echo who got her own show. And I promise you, I've heard like almost little to no one talk about that show. Like, I don't know anybody really. I've talked to so many Marvel fans that don't even know that it came out, you know, and it's like, and I didn't love it. I thought it was entertaining enough, but it wasn't great. And I think that's kind of the thing, you know, like you were saying before, like this quantity over quality thing. It's just like it doesn't it does kind of beg the question of like, well, where's this all headed and why does everybody have to get their own kind of side piece and sideshow? I am excited about
Yeah.
some things to come though, but getting back to Spider-Man Homecoming, I'm curious, and Tommy, I'll throw it to you again this time.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite character in the movie? Who is somebody that you think is just like the perfect casting, or just like was just every time you watch this movie, you just really enjoy seeing that character? And who would you say is your least favorite character as well?
I'd say probably my favorite is Ned. This is his sort of debut film. I just love the chemistry between him and Peter. He's really funny. Other than there's a scene when they're walking through the hallway towards the end of the film, and he's sort of reenacting what happened previously, and that was a bit. The humor wasn't great there, but the rest of the film hilarious. Loved when he was in the house as well, or the apartment, and he dropped the Lego Death Star. That was and just I think it's great how very soon into the film he learns obviously that Peter is Spider-Man, which is very different as well. Obviously the Sam Raimi films, it took a while for different characters to learn the identity of Spider-Man, but yeah, it's great comedy throughout. So I'd say Ned. Least favorite, there's a few. Liz is not, as I've said, is not great. Some of the characters around Vulture, very very generic. It's just some just guys in a room with Vulture. Yeah, I'd say those are my least favorite. Yeah, and there's also a scene very early on where we have the kind of the video that's played on the screen in the school, and there's some comedy there as well. The characters sort of like, it's very memey comedy there.
Right.
I didn't like that. So some of those they are better in the later films, but in this one, just some of the comedy around that didn't really work for me. So yeah.
Yeah, no, fair enough, fair enough. It's funny because like you see like the character of Betty Brant, who of course in the Sam Raimi films, is working at the Daily Bugle already, and then here
Yeah.
she's one of those reporters in the school, as like kind of like this younger student, which is kind of a funny approach to doing that. Same with the character of Flash, who's like a hulking kind of like more like brute classic bully in the OG one. And in this one, it's kind of like, it's played by Tony Revolori, who has grown on me with the role as time goes on, but they made him kind of like this very like this bully who's obviously insecure, and like has like we learn later on has some issues at home with his parents, so they kind of like trickles down. So it's interesting kind of approach that they took to kind of change characters up. For me, I'd have to say I think if outside of Tom Holland as Spider-Man, I really like Michael Keaton as Vulture, and I think it's a shame that they haven't done anything with him again since the post-credit scene, especially since things got really messy. If you guys have seen Morbius, with the fact that well, sorry, spoilers here for Morbius, for just briefly.
Yeah.
The post-credit scene for them, mind you, the whole movie is just its own thing. Morbius is on his own adventure, only for the post-credit scene to happen. And for it to be, we see the sky is purple and it looks like the end of No Way Home. And I guess in all of that, in those different universes, like supposedly mending, it kind of confuses No Way Home slightly. When Doctor Strange put everything back, Michael Keaton's character was still in prison, but he was like through the multiverse, he moved over to Morbius's universe, and they realized they have this guy in prison that hasn't committed a crime because he's not in his universe anymore. So they release him, and then Morbius reaches out to him and like says like, I heard we have a similar enemy, which is Spider-Man, but Morbius hasn't met Spider-Man yet. And so they kind of tee up the fact that now Michael Keaton's Vulture is in Morbius's universe, which just kind of is confusing. Honestly, I feel like it's kind of a shame that they did that. But yeah, Michael Keaton will probably be my favorite character, with the character of Liz probably being my least favorite. I just felt like watching it again, there's a little bit of her performance that just feels like a little overdone at times. It just feels like she's overacting in slight moments. And I just never care about that romance, especially knowing that Zendaya's right there on the side as the person that we really are going to care about in the next movies. What about you, Norin? How do you feel about what's your favorite character?
Favorites and least. Yeah. So my favorite is Michael Keaton. I like Vulture definitely for sure. He's probably in my top 3 or top 5 favorite of Spider-Man villains in live action. I think Michael Keaton did the role very well. And like I said, it's a shame we haven't gotten more with him. And that you brought it up, I thought it was kind of funny. Yeah, Flash is probably my least favorite character because I always forget, dude, that he's even in here. Like I literally just watched this last night I was at work and I freaking forgot this dude was in this movie. So he's probably my least favorite because I just never remember him.
Yeah, fair enough, man. I could totally see why, 100%. And another character that I feel like a lot of people tend to forget is in here is you have Donald Glover in here as essentially the Prowler, which we do see in Across the Spider-Verse, or yeah, Across the Spider-Verse. He's in a small little cameo in the Prowler suit, in like a live action version of him. He mentions that he wants to help Spider-Man get those weapons off the street because he has a nephew in the area, which is of course Miles Morales. So I like that little setup and tease. Maybe one day we'll see Miles Morales appear in this universe. They don't really do anything with him. He's more of a cameo, but it is an interesting element. Now, one other thing I've been having a lot of fun with when it comes to these streams is maybe a favorite and a least favorite scene. For me personally, I think my favorite sequence of this movie is probably the boat sequence. I just feel like it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy just like the camera work there. I enjoy like the hearing that Michael Giacchino's theme, and I kind of like what it leads up to, that speech with from Iron Man to Spider-Man. You know, the whole like, if you're nothing without the suit, then you're nothing at all. You know, the whole, if you really cared, you'd be here right now, and then the suit opening up and him walking out, like just everything that whole sequence leads to. I think is a lot of fun. And if there's anything that I just like struggle with in terms of like something kind of like cringe, like Tommy was talking about, I think the whole party sequence with like, you know, like, oh, show up with Spider-Man and him outside, like on top of the roof with his mask off, like being like, hey, I'm friends with Peter, blah, blah, blah. Like, and of course he realizes how silly it is too. And then he goes off and ends up getting lost in all the Vulture stuff. But like, yeah, that's probably my least favorite sequence. It just feels like sometimes, while I do enjoy Ned, I think he's funny, and I love the whole like guy in the chair thing and him like saying that he was looking at porn when the teacher comes in and asks what he's doing in the computer room. I thought all that's funny, but that whole thing with him just kind of like that portion of the movie at the beginning where he wants to like tell everybody that Peter's connected to Spider-Man and the party thing, something I'm not crazy about. So Tommy, how about you? Favorite scene, least favorite scene?
I don't know if I could say one favorite scene. There's a few, just stuff with Ned, Peter. I think this the school trip as well, with the tower and the lift and all this. That was a really good action scene because it great use of the score as well. The gadgets, just the way he's got to, you know, really go all in here, you know, and kind of prove himself. And just again, yeah, scenes with Happy. Obviously Tony and Peter as well. Yeah, I couldn't really say that favorite scene. You know, one single scene. But yeah, there's a lot of them ones. Least favorite scene. Yeah, obviously I've said about the cringy moments. That yeah, there's probably that bit there. You know, just stuff with, as I say, Vulture. Just my brain just kind of switches off a lot of the time there. Very uninvesting for me, you know, and just it's a shame because I did want to get behind, you know, his character even more. I guess probably the best scene though of the film, you know, now I think of it, is the car scene when we have the confrontation. Actually, yeah, no, that is probably the best scene. Just especially the bit where you know, Liz is in the car as well, and you actually get Michael Keaton, you know, Vulture realizing there and then what's going on. I think, you know, the bit after that when he gets the gun out, that was a bit potentially he didn't need to do that. It was more effective when it was just you know, the sort of the glances, the reactions there. Yeah, that's really, and so yeah, favorite scene probably that as well. And least favorite would just be some of those cringy moments and stuff with just these random, really generic characters around Vulture. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good call out too. For me, that was when I noticed while I was watching it just a little bit ago that the moments where I like looked at my phone or something for a second or would like check a text while I was looking up, while was those sequences with Vulture like in their lair. That was where
Yeah.
literally, now I think about it, that's literally where it happened almost every time. So that's a
Yeah.
really good call out there for sure. What
Yeah.
about you, Norin? Favorite scene, least favorite scene?
I'd probably have to go with the car scene as my favorite too, because that reminds me of kind of like those moments in the movies, like Al Pacino and Robert De Niro in Heat when they're talking across the table, or like
Yeah.
in the new Batman when he's talking to Riddler, you know, and he finally meets him and they're talking for the first time. You get that tension, that what are they thinking? What is that one person thinking? And they're looking at each other and all that. So I think the car sequence definitely one of those my favorite. Least favorite, I would probably actually say like the post-credit scene, just because it's totally useless. It's just so useless. It's like
Right.
one of those ones when you wait at the theater and you're just like, what? Like, why did we wait for this? Like,
Are you talking about the one at the prison or the Captain America one?
the prison.
Gotcha. Yeah. The Captain America one, I'll never forget seeing that in theaters for the first time. Obviously you get to the end and it's just one of those clips that we saw earlier. That's probably one of my favorite comedic beats in the
Comedian
movie
one.
is when they like are at they're like a whatever PE or whatever, and they're playing these tapes from Captain America, giving like these motivational speeches or rules and stuff like that. And then the teacher's just like, I'm pretty sure this guy's a war criminal now, but the state requires I play these. It's like I just love that beat. We see it later on in the detention room, and then of course in the post-credit scene, of course, just making fun of us as an audience for sitting there waiting for that post-credit scene. But yeah, no, I think that's always a bummer now. Rewatching some of these movies is some of these post-credit scenes that ultimately have led to really nothing. And now with Morbius kind of screwing up that post-credit scene even more, it's like, will we ever see Scorpion? I thought Scorpion was going to be the villain of the next movie, and then instead we get Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, which I enjoyed, but it isn't really fully there. Now, one thing I've been having a lot of fun with too is like, we've touched on like kind of the future and like how things have changed and stuff like that. But how do you guys specifically feel? And Robert, I'll throw it to you this time first. How do you guys specifically feel about the trajectory of Tom Holland Spider-Man since this? It's cool to talk about these movies in the moment and review them when they come out, but we have now, seen multiple Avengers movies featuring this character, including and his own movies. So how do you feel about what they've done with Tom Holland's Spider-Man after this?
Ooh, I'm a little I'm excited about some things. I'm very excited about it just because I think there's a great potential for his character and where it's going to eventually land. I've heard some rumors though that Tom Holland's kind of tired of the role too. Like I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard some rumors that he's kind of tired of doing it and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's going to play into it at all. But I think with the hype that Spider-Man's got and the excitement that's going on around it, like I said, right now they have the potential to possibly have like almost a second kind of Iron Man moment. And I'm not saying like, end him and end that character, but I mean, have a potential character that we're going to care about that much. You know what I mean? And we're going to want him to either lead the team or he's going to be, like I said, the one that makes that ultimate sacrifice if it ever does come down to it. But yeah, like I said, I'm excited for the potential, but a little nervous too as well. Always skeptical when it comes to Marvel nowadays.
I mean, fair enough, fair enough. What about you, Tommy? How do you feel they've handled this character moving forward, and what do you foresee moving forward with him?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they ended it now with Tom Holland, I'd be fine with that. I think he got his time to really, deliver as well with Infinity War, Far From Home. I personally love Far From Home. No Way Home as well. Although I wasn't a fan of the ending of that film and what they'd done with the character and how all the other characters basically, in the end of the film, they didn't remember him, did they? So
Right.
it was kind of like this whole trilogy. I was not a fan of the ending, how it kind of undone in a sense. All the relationships, everything that had happened really, it's kind of undone that. But yeah, I guess if he was in more films, I'd be there for it. Potentially, he might, yeah, I can see how he not want to do even more films and sort of move on to different projects. But it seems like he's always going to look young, with Tom Holland. So potentially, he could be in, for loads more films and it would work. But I don't know. Yeah, I think the trilogy we got, I think Far From Home and No Way Home, especially, great showcase of Tom Holland. Spider Man, and just obviously Infinity War, especially. The moments towards the end of the film, especially, some great acting there. Tom Holland was great. This was the worst, really, for me, Homecoming, but still I enjoyed it. And I thought he was great in the role, but he got even better. So yeah, I guess I'm satisfied, and equally, open to seeing him in more, films. going forward.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm excited to see what they do moving forward with him. I gotta kind of I can echo what you're saying and agree a little bit like that leaving it where like all the relationships have kind of been erased is kind of a sad place to pick up the story. But it is one of
Yeah.
those things where I have a feeling they'll kind of undo that, and maybe that'll kind of take away from the impact of it a little bit, but they'll probably undo something or unlock their memories, or at least the main characters unlock their memories to some extent. At least that's what I assume will kind of take place at some point. But yeah, I definitely agree with you guys that like the trajectory of his character has been great. I think that Tom Holland has really been able to stretch his, his muscles, so to speak, his acting muscles with this character. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what they do next with him. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do in the next Avengers movie, how big of a role he's going to play. Because now that a lot of the main players that would have been at the center of the poster, the Iron Mans, the Captain Americas, they're not really going to be at the center of these new posters. It is one of those things that it begs the question of like, how are they going to, tackle, who are the main faces of the Avengers moving forward? I'm assuming maybe him and Doctor Strange.
Falcon. We got Falcon too.
Falcon, right,
and that's what scares me a little bit is that we haven't really gotten so much content with all of them together. Like we really don't know how the chemistry is going to be for this new crew, because when we first got introduced, like you said, to all the other guys, like we had Robert Downey Jr., then we introduced like, Thor, Hulk, and they were all kind of involved in each other's things. Captain America, they were all there, all involved. And now it kind of seems like everybody has their own thing. Like you said, Shang-Chi hasn't popped up in a long time. Like it's just, how is the chemistry going to work with all these actors,
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. It's like, a lot of these characters, I think of the fun of like Infinity War and Endgame is that all the way up to Endgame, there was characters that hadn't even really met that like get to kind of meet, but other characters had kind of met them, So like I love the scene where like in Infinity War when, Thor shows up in Wakanda with Groot and Rocket, and then like he knows them. He's gone on this whole little adventure with them. That moment is epic. And then there's that funny line where like Groot says, "I'm Groot" to Captain America, and he says, "I'm Steve Rogers." Like I just love that there's those jokes and like that you can kind of have like that some characters know each other and some don't. But yeah, we're kind of in a phase where there's a bunch of characters that don't know each other, or they do know a couple of characters, but not much. So in the case of like Shang-Chi, he's had a conversation at the end with like Wong. He knows Wong, but he's had a conversation with Captain Marvel and with what's his face? I believe Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner was in that conversation
Bruce,
too.
Bruce Banner, yeah.
They really haven't like pulled them into the fold yet. So I am curious to see what they do. Now we are getting closer to an hour, and I told these kind fellows that I unfortunately have to work today. So we are going to be wrapping up shortly, but I really wanted to briefly check out some of these comments we got. HC saying absolutely love these live streams. Mike from Did You See That popped in here to say, yo, fellas, said that he hasn't seen this movie many times, maybe one or two times. However, I do like that Tom Holland looks like he genuinely fits into the whole school scenes in the high school compared to Toby and Andrew. Yeah, it's definitely something we were talking about earlier. And he also likes the fact that they addressed the damage from previous Marvel movies with Michael Keaton's character at the beginning of the construction site. Yeah, I like that as well, for sure. But guys, listen, it's been a pleasure to have you guys on. I want to give you guys the floor really quickly. I'll throw it over to you first, Robert, and then over to you, Tommy. What can people expect over on your channel? Anything you want to plug over there? Like I said, guys, the links to both of these guys are down below in the description box. So after the stream, go check out their channel. You got tons of great content to catch up on. Anything you want to plug over there, Robert?
Well, thanks so much, Anthony, for asking me to be on and stuff. This was a lot of fun and everything. And in terms of my channel, NorinRadd, I basically usually do a lot of physical media content in terms of, and horror content too. Cover a lot of horror movies because right now I'm doing my Nightmare on Elm Street review series, covering Courage the Cowardly Dog with my buddy Steve. So I got that going on. And then, like I said, anytime I pick up some cool DVDs or Blu-rays or 4Ks, I'm always going to show them off. So those are the kind of videos that you can see over at my channel.
Nice, man. Nice. Yeah, definitely some great content over there. Some great Scooby-Doo content too, which is what you were doing when we first met. Like you were doing like extensive reviews on every Scooby-Doo series, every Scooby-Doo movie. Like I know that took you a long time, and I still I loved those videos when I first met you. I was getting lost and all that. Tommy, what about you? I know that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Oh no, it was so good doing those videos. It was really good because that, like I said, I connected with a lot of people through those videos.
Yeah, man, those were a lot of fun, man. And I commend you. You got through them pretty fast too. Like you were watching Scooby-Doo's content like crazy. Like I can't imagine. I have to imagine you had nothing but Scooby-Doo dreams for like a good few months. Just
Oh yeah, yeah. I was singing it, dreaming it, thought I was in the mystery. It was crazy.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Tommy, what about you? I know that you're also really big into physical media and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
what do people expect over on your channel?
Yeah, actually, if before I forget, I'm going to be redoing, a Blu-ray Steelbook video this year. So my top 10, I think it would be favorite Blu-ray Steelbooks, and just generally this year, I want to do more lists again. I started the channel in 2018. I did quite a few lists back then. I really enjoyed doing that. So the James Bond ranking, I'm going to be redoing that in the next couple of months because I've done it years ago, and as well to include No Time to Die, came out obviously since, and yeah, obviously Star Wars as well, as we've said. So next up will be The Force Awakens. Probably be reviewing that in the next couple of weeks, and then going through just in release date order the rest of the films that came out after that. So Rogue One, Last Jedi, etc. So yeah, just a lot of Bond content I've done in the past. I'm gonna do some more of that again this year and stuff like that. So that's a few of the things I've got coming.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much, genuinely, for joining. For anybody who watched live, thank you for watching. And for anybody who watches this after the fact, which I know would probably be most people, thank you guys for getting this far into the video. Definitely appreciate it. Again, the link to Norin and to CineArts down below in the description box. Go give them some love. And we'll see all you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll see you.
Bye.